Good evening. And here we are again, and it's Tales and Cocktails. Tonight, well, after last week's Faulkner and A Rose for Emily, we need to lighten up. So tonight I'm doing a series of rather fun, light pieces, 2 by Joyce Grenfell and 1 by Nora Ephron. Joyce Grenfell. In the 50s, there was a series of English comedies from, I believe, Ealing Studios. And I remember in one of them, and I can't remember the title or whatever, but Joyce Grenfell, her character, was seated on the bed, on the side of the bed with her mother, and it was the night before her wedding. And she simply said, "Oh, Mommy." And her mother said, "I know, dear, but close your eyes and think of England." I've never forgotten it. I mean, a number of English actresses would have made it very funny. Grenfell made it the end of the world with those 2 words, "Oh, Mommy." She was just absolutely delightful, everything she was in. So I'm delighted to be able to read a couple of pieces by her. Okay, the first is entitled Not Being Asked to Dance. There is a stage, or there was a stage in my youth, when a girl is glad to dance with her father, because it is better to dance with anyone than be left standing alone by the door. Not that I minded this very much. I was so interested in watching people that I soon got over the faint sense of failure at not being asked, and would sit by myself completely held by the sights I saw and the developing relationships I witnessed among my friends. My pa still drew admiring glances when he whirled me around at my first dance. There was a period flavor about the way he danced. None of your come dancing just behind the beat style. He navigated neatly, using up all the available floor space, never bumping into other couples, and marked the beat clearly. Not being asked to dance could be painful, but my people-watching activities eased the embarrassment for me. At the back of the page-a-day diaries I have been keeping for years, I write in quotations I want to remember, stories I've heard, and remarks made. Looking at an old diary, I found this. On not being married, Irish voice. When you get over the disgrace of it, the life is more airy. I sometimes felt this at dances. Not being asked to dance gave me a sense of space in which I could observe and imagine. Anyway, I felt invisible when I watched. By any standard, I was very green, and although I looked grown up, I was immature to the point of idiocy. I knew roughly how babies came. A small contemporary with sniggers had told me in a Hertfordshire garden, and I went straight to my mother and asked if it were true. Who told you? Loyalty very nearly sealed my lips. My mother had guessed who had told me, and was sad because she had wanted to tell me herself when the time came for me to ask the question. We didn't go into it very deeply. I wasn't very much interested, and lived on quite comfortably with hazy visions about sex and very little curiosity. So it never occurred to me, even at 18, at my own coming out dance, that it might be misconstrued if I said to a young man, a frequent dancing partner, and a friend, "I know a marvelously quiet place where we can go," and I led him up the back stairs of Aunt Nancy's London house to a top passage where the unwanted sofas and chairs from the drawing rooms had been stacked to make room for dancing. The young man, less green than I was, made as if to kiss me. I was surprised and appalled. It spoiled everything. I got up from the sofa, pushing him away, and ran down to the cloakroom, where I found my best friend, Virginia Graham, filling in time because no one had booked her for that dance. The most terrible thing has happened. Dee tried to kiss me. He didn't. Yes, isn't it ghastly? We were both shaken. Coming home in the taxi after the party, I sat on the tip-up seat, facing my parents. I've got something awful to tell you. Dee tried to kiss me. My pa said something like, "Oh, well, never mind." And my mother, pleased, I expect, that her child had done so well at her coming-out party, didn't say much. In all seriousness, I said, "Do you think I should ever speak to him again?" My pa thumped me gently and said, "Oh, I think I should." So I did. Oh, where is it? Here it is. And this is the other by Joyce Grenfell, entitled Film Star Glamour. I had begun to get bigger parts in films, and in 1949 I appeared as the first of the gawky, overgrown schoolgirl types, a folk dance enthusiast in Eric Linklater's Poet's Pub, that I was soon called upon to repeat in many other pictures. Miss Gossage in The Happiest Days of Your Life, and the unrequited policewoman Ruby Gates in several disguises, in 3 of Londa and Gilliatt's successful St. Trinian series. These films were fun to do. Pleasant people worked in them, including Margaret Rutherford, who read poetry better than almost anyone I ever heard. Even better than she played those endearing caricatures she was so justly famed for. And Alistair Sim, with his long, sad face and heavy-lidded eyes. He's an essentially non-theatrical man, and I think he was probably as surprised as I was to be in the world of films. My mother wrote to me from America, wishing I would, just for once, just now and then, look a little less unglamorous in the films in which I acted. Picture after picture reached her local movie house, with me playing those gawky girls and failing to get my man, and she did so wish her friends could see me in a more becoming guise. On her way over to visit us, she told a new acquaintance at her table on board ship that I was in the film they were going to see that evening. As usual, I looked plain and awkward, and my ma's heart sank. When the lights went up at the end of the picture, her companion asked, "Which was your daughter?" "I made a mistake," said my mother. "She wasn't in it." Only after she saw the £1 million note, in which I had scenes with Gregory Peck and played an Edwardian duchess in beautiful clothes designed for me by Maggie First, did she feel like telling her friends to go and see me in a movie. I remember getting a letter from Carly Dawson, my childhood friend to whom I had always written since she went back to America before the war, telling me that my cameo part of the hotel proprietress in the movie Genevieve had been well reviewed in her local Washington paper. The short scenes had been fun to do and were filmed in half a day. The notice Carly enclosed praised my performance generously, but the critic mentioned that I had a set of teeth only a horse could envy. Glamorous publicity photographs taken for a new show had just reached me, and with regrettable vanity, I sent one, mouth shut, to the critic. He wrote back what was nothing less than a love letter. I had always been told never to answer critics, but this unexpected result made me glad I hadn't listened to advice. Oh, vanity, vanity. I have never minded looking funny when it was intentional. But the public doesn't always realize that one is acting. And I've met with surprised reactions from people who are familiar with my movie image, but have never before seen me as myself. I startle them by being much larger than they expect, and evidently less peculiar looking. In Leeds, a friendly woman in a hotel said she hoped I wouldn't mind a personal remark. I braced myself for the blow. She touched me gently on the arm and whispered, "You look so much better since you've had your teeth fixed." All I could think of in reply was, "I'm so glad." At the time of writing, I have not yet had my teeth fixed. Joyce Grenfell. Now, Nora Ephron. She was 3 times nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay and also for the Writers Guild of America for the following: Silkwood, When Harry Met Sally, and Sleepless in Seattle. Her second husband was called Bernstein, of Bernstein and Woodward. And I find this piece of hers quite delightful. A few words about breasts. I have to begin with a few words about androgyny. In grammar school, in the 5th and 6th grades, we were all tyrannized by a rigid set of rules that supposedly determined whether we were boys or girls. The episode in Huckleberry Finn, where Huck is disguised as a girl and gives himself away by the way he threads a needle and catches a ball, that kind of thing. We learned that the way you sat, crossed your legs, held a cigarette, and looked at your nails, the way you did these things instinctively, was absolute proof of your sex. Now, obviously, most children did not take this literally, but I did. I thought that just one slip, just one incorrect cross of my legs, or flick of an imaginary cigarette ash, would turn me from whatever I was into the other thing. That would be all it took, really. Even though I was outwardly a girl and had many of the trappings generally associated with girldom, a girl's name, for example, and dresses, my own telephone, an autograph book. I spent the early years of my adolescence absolutely certain that I might at any point gum it up. I did not feel at all like a girl. I was boyish. I was athletic, ambitious, outspoken, competitive, noisy, rambunctious. I had scabs on my knees, and my socks slid into my loafers, and I could throw a football. I wanted desperately not to be that way, not to be a mixture of both things, but instead just one. A girl, a definite, indisputable girl, as soft and as pink as a nursery. And nothing would do that for me, I felt, but breasts. I was about 6 months younger than everyone else in my class. And so for about 6 months after it began, for 6 months after my friends had begun to develop, that was the word we used, develop, I was not particularly worried. I would sit in the bathtub and look down at my breasts and know that any day now, any second now, they would start growing like everyone else's. They didn't. "I want to buy a bra," I said to my mother one night. "What for?" she said. My mother was really hateful about bras. And by the time my third sister had gotten to the point where she was ready to want one, my mother had worked the whole business into a comedy routine. "Why not use a Band-Aid instead?" she would say. It was a source of great pride to my mother that she had never even had to wear a brassiere until she had her fourth child, and then only because a gynecologist made her. It was incomprehensible to me that anyone could ever be proud of something like that. It was the 1950s, for God's sake. Jane Russell. Cashmere sweaters. Couldn't my mother see that? "I am too old to wear an undershirt," screaming, weeping, shouting. "Then don't wear an undershirt," my mother said. "But I want to buy a bra." "What for?" I suppose that for most girls, breasts, brassieres, that entire thing, has more trauma, more to do with the coming of adolescence, with becoming a woman, than anything else. Certainly more than getting your period, although that too was traumatic, symbolic. But you could see breasts. They were there. They were visible. Whereas a girl could claim to have her period for months before she actually got it, and nobody would ever know the difference, which is exactly what I did. All you had to do was make a great fuss over having enough nickels for the Kotex machine and walk around clutching your stomach and moaning for 3 to 5 days a month about the curse, and you could convince anybody. There is a school of thought somewhere in the Women's Lib, Women's Mag gynecology establishment that claims that menstrual cramps are purely psychological, and I lean toward it. Not that I didn't have them finally. Agonizing cramps, heating pad cramps, go down to the school nurse and lie on the cot cramps. But unlike any pain I had ever suffered, I adored the pain of cramps, welcomed it, wallowed in it, bragged about it. I can't go, I have cramps. I can't do that, I have cramps. And most of all, gigglingly, blushingly, I can't swim, I have cramps. Nobody ever used the hardcore word menstruation. God, what an awful word. Never that. I have cramps. The morning I first got my period, I went into my mother's bedroom to tell her. And my mother, my utterly hateful about bras mother, burst into tears. It was really a lovely moment. And I remember it so clearly, not just because it was one of the 2 times I ever saw my mother cry on my account. The other was when I was caught being a 6-year-old kleptomaniac. But also because the incident did not mean to me what it meant to her. Her little girl, her firstborn, had finally become a woman. That was what she was crying about. My reaction to the event, however, was that I might well be a woman in some scientific textbook sense, and could at least keep faking every month and stop wasting all those nickels. But in another sense, in a visual sense, a visible sense, I was as androgynous and as liable to tip over into boyhood as ever. I started with a 28 AA bra. I don't think they made them any smaller in those days, although I gather that now you can buy bras for 5-year-olds that don't have any cups whatsoever in them. Trainer bras, they are called. My first brassiere came from Robinson's department store in Beverly Hills. I went there alone, shaking, positive they would look me over and smile and tell me to come back next year. An actual fitter took me into the dressing room and stood over me while I took off my blouse and tried the first one on. The little puffs stood out on my chest. "Lean over," said the fitter. To this day, I am not sure what fitters in broad apartments, in department stores, do except to tell you to lean over. I leaned over with the fleeting hope that my breasts would miraculously fall out of my body and into the puffs. Nothing. "Don't worry about it," said my friend Libby, some months later when things had not improved. "You'll get them after you're married." "What are you talking about?" I said. "When you get married," Libby explained, "your husband will touch your breasts and rub them and kiss them, and they'll grow." That was the killer. Necking I could deal with. Intercourse I could deal with. But it had never crossed my mind that a man was going to touch my breasts. That breasts had something to do with all that. Petting, my God, they never mentioned petting in my little sex manual about the fertilization of the ovum. I became dizzy, for I knew instantly, as naive as I had been only a moment before, that only part of what she was saying was true. The touching, rubbing, kissing part, not the growing part. And I knew that no one would ever want to marry me. I had no breasts. I would never have breasts. My best friend in school was Diana Raskob. She lived a block from me in a house full of wonders. English muffins, for instance. The Raskobs were the first people in Beverly Hills to have English muffins for breakfast. They also had an apricot tree in the back, and a badminton court, and a subscription to 17 magazine, and hundreds of games like Sorry and Parcheesi and Treasure Hunt and anagrams. Diana and I spent 3 or 4 afternoons a week in their den, reading and playing and eating. Diana's mother's kitchen was full of the most colossal assortment of junk food I have ever been exposed to. My house was full of apples and peaches and milk and homemade chocolate chip cookies, which were nice and good for you, but not right before dinner or you'll spoil your appetite. Diana's house had nothing in it that was good for you. And what's more, you could stuff it in right up until dinner, and nobody cared. Barbecue potato chips, they were the first in them too. Giant bottles of ginger ale, fresh popcorn with melted butter, hot fudge sauce on Baskin-Robbins Jamocha ice cream, powdered sugar donuts from Vanderkamp's. Diana and I had been best friends since we were 7. We were about equally popular in school, which is to say not particularly. We had about the same success with boys, extremely intermittent. And we looked much the same, dark, tall, gangly. In September, just before school begins, I am 11 years old, about to enter the 7th grade, and Diana and I have not seen each other all summer. I have been to camp, and she's been somewhere like Banff with her parents. We are meeting, as we often do, on the street, midway between our 2 houses, and we will walk back to Diana's and eat junk and talk about what has happened to each of us that summer. I am walking down Walden Drive in my jeans and my father's shirt hanging out and my old red loafers with the socks falling into them, and coming toward me is, I take a deep breath, a young woman, Diana. Her hair is curled and she has a waist and hips and a bust, and she is wearing a straight skirt, an article of clothing I have been repeatedly told I will be unable to wear until I have the hips to hold it up. My jaw drops, and suddenly I am crying hysterically. Can't catch my breath, sobbing. My best friend has betrayed me. She has gone ahead without me and done it. She has shaped up. Here are some things I did to help. Bought a Mark Eden bus developer. Slept on my back for 4 years. Splashed cold water on them every night because some French actress said in Life magazine that that was what she did for her perfect bust line. Unfortunately, I resigned myself to a bad toss and began to wear padded bras. I think about them now. Think about all those years in high school I went around in them. My 3 padded bras, every single one of them with different size breasts. Each time I changed bras, I changed sizes. 1 week, nice, perky, but not too obtrusive breasts. The next, medium-sized, slightly pointy ones. The next week, knockers, true knockers. All the time, whatever size I was, carrying around this rubberized appendage on my chest that occasionally crashed into a wall and was poked inward and had to be poked outward. I think about all that and wonder how anyone kept a straight face through it. My parents, who normally had no restraints about needling me, why did they say nothing as they watched my chest go up and down? My friends, who would periodically inspect my breasts for signs of growth and reassure me, why didn't they at least counsel consistency? And the bathing suits. I die when I think about the bathing suits. That was the era which you could lay an uninhabited bathing suit on the beach and someone would make a pass at it. I would put one on, an absurd swimsuit with an enormous bust built into it, the bones from the suit stabbing me in the rib cage and leaving little red welts on my body. And there I would be, my chest plunging straight downward, absolutely vertically, from my collarbone to the top of my suit. And then suddenly, wham! Out came all that padding and material and wiring absolutely horizontally. Buster Klepper was the first boy who ever touched them. He was my boyfriend my senior year of high school. There's a picture of him in my high school yearbook that makes him look quite attractive in a Jewish, horn-rimmed glasses sort of way. But the picture does not show the pimples, which were airbrushed out, or the dumbness. Well, that isn't really fair. He wasn't dumb. He just wasn't terribly bright. His mother refused to accept it, refused to accept the relentlessly average report cards, refused to deal with her son's inevitable destiny in some junior college or other. He was tested, she would say to me, apropos of nothing, and it came at 145. That's near genius. Had the word underachiever been coined, she probably would have lobbed that one at me too. Anyway, Buster was really very sweet, which is, I know, damning with faint praise, but there it is. I was the editor of the front page of the high school newspaper, and he was editor of the back page. We had to work together, side by side, in the print shop, and that was how it started. On our first date, we went to see April Love, starring Pat Boone. Then we started going together. Buster had a green coupe, a 1950 Ford with an engine he had hand-chromed until it shone, dazzled, reflected the image of anyone who looked into it, anyone usually being Buster polishing it, or the gas station attendants he constantly asked to check the oil in order for them to be overwhelmed by the sparkle on the valves. The car also had a boot stretched over the back for reasons I never understood. Hanging from the rearview mirror, as was the custom, was a pair of Angora dice. A previous girlfriend named Solange, who was famous throughout Beverly Hills High School for having no pigment in her right eyebrow, had knitted them for him. Buster and I would ride around town, the two of us seated to the left of the steering wheel. I would shift gears. It was nice. There was necking, terrific necking. First in the car, overlooking Los Angeles, from what is now the Truesdale Estates. Then on the bed of his parents' cabana at Ocean House. Incredibly wonderful, frustrating necking. I loved it, really. But no further than necking. Please don't, please. Because there I was absolutely terrified of the general implications of going a step further with a near dummy. And also terrified of his finding out that there was next to nothing there, which he knew, of course. He wasn't that dumb. I broke up with him at one point. I think we were apart for about 2 weeks. At the end of that time, I drove down to see a friend at a boarding school in Palos Verdes Estates, and a disc jockey played April Love on the radio 4 times during the trip. I took it as a sign. I drove straight back to Griffith Park to a golf tournament Buster was playing in. He was the 6th-seeded teenage golf player in Southern California, and presented myself back to him on the green of the 18th hole. It was all very dramatic. That night we went to a drive-in, and I let him get his hand under my protuberances and onto my breasts. He really didn't seem to mind at all. And that is Nora Ephron. Indeed. Well, I hope you've enjoyed these two. I think they're quite fun. And a nice lightener after a Rose family. And now it's time to figure out what on earth I'm going to read for you next week. I hope you've enjoyed it, my dears. I've enjoyed reading them. And I look forward to seeing you a week from tonight at 6 o'clock for Tales and Cocktails. Good night.